Dear friends, it's a pleasure and honor for me to address so distinguished audience. I'm sorry that I was unable to participate in your discussion yesterday about Russia and the Russian democracy. In the majority of the cases, I would agree with the ideas expressed in the paper presented to your conference by Mike McFaul. Not in all of the cases, but in the majority of the cases. I'm glad that your general solution, the general result of the discussion, absolutely coexists with my own statement that, of course, next elections, both parliamentary and the presidential, are absolutely crucial for the future of the Russian democracy. A few words why the fight for the stability of the democracy in Russia is so difficult and why these elections are very important. Usually, the communist regime disappears in the intensive economic crisis, when all of the potential of the pleasant and the very pleasant solutions is exhausted, and the new, young, emerging democratic governments are left with the unpleasant choice of very unpleasant and unpleasant policies. They have to start their work with the price liberalizations, cutting of the subsidies, tax reforms, etc., cutting of the military expenditures, creating a lot of enemies and dissatisfied in the various strata of the population of the previously communist countries. These post-communist reforms are, first of all, the change, very radical change of the style of life, change of the social and economical position, change of the distribution of the wealth and influence in the society, etc. And as it's very well known and understood, I think, by the citizens, the public reaction on this change is very much asymmetric. Of course, there are many problems that were most pressing in the previous Soviet Unions that are completely resolved now in Russia. For instance, any poll in the year 91 would show you that the problem that worries most in the Russian population is the problem of the food supply, shortages, and lines. Now, you would not find these problems in any pool anymore. There is no such a problem. You don't have to wait in lines for a night to buy a kilogram of bread. You don't have to travel thousands of kilometers to Moscow to try to buy a kilogram of bad salami, etc. All of this is in the past. But it's only natural. Why it should be different? For instance, now for the Russian population, the realities of the post-communist economy is something from the very, very remote future. It was not with us. It was not we who waited for a few hours in lines. It is only natural that you can buy everything. It's only natural that your currency is convertible. It's only natural that you have a private sector in your economy, etc. But also, you are having a lot of problems. We are having problems of the increased inequality. We are having problems of the high inflation. We are having the problems of the less job security. We are having the additional problems with the crime, etc. And this is responsibility of the government. Somebody is winning in the reforms and somebody is losing in the reforms. If I'm winning because I'm hardworking, clever, and lucky. If I'm losing not because I'm lazy, drunkard, etc. I'm losing because of this terrible policy. And that means that the public reaction on this change, difficult change, is very asymmetric. If the problems are resolved, it's natural. You would not you would not tell thank you to the government which made what is necessary to do. But if the problems appears, it is responsibility of the government. And that, of course, creates enormous possibilities for the opposition, for especially reformed communist parties, to get additional public support. Because in some very short period of time, they are irresponsible for anymore. They are getting the support and the satisfaction of the people in concrete policies and the concrete realities of the country. And then, of course, for the older generation, what is important, that they are strongly associated with the old times. Everything was good in the old times. We were young there. And that, of course, creates very serious possibilities for them. So it is not, of course, unexpected that in many post-communist countries, reformed communist parties are winning second elections after the start of the reform. It's more or less now well-studied phenomenon. In Russia, it is especially difficult to fight for the stability of the democracy because our position in this difficult age of transformation, from the point of view of the national problem, was quite different. For instance, in Poland, it was possible to promote difficult economic reforms of the year 90 because it was also the moment of the national independence. After the decades of the Russian domination, for the first time, Poland once again was the independent state. And you could address to the people and to tell them, well, you have to suffer, but you are suffering for the independence of Poland. You can do the same, for instance, in the Baltic states. You can do the same in many East European countries, etc. The new independence was enormous anesthesia for this help for these reforms. For Russia, the situation was absolutely asymmetrical. It was not the new independence. It was lost empire. It was additional problems of the Russians abroad. It was the huge possibilities for the radical nationalists to exploit the Weimar syndrome, to tell the stories how we were not defeated in the war, but we were betrayed, etc., etc., etc. So that means that the opposition has a possibility to combine the communist and the nationalist myths, making it quite a dangerous force. If the Russian Communist Party would be the nice, reformed East European type, then its victory in the next election would not be really important for the future of the Russian democracy. Well, if we could have any hopes that after the victory in the elections, which we could not exclude, they will only tell, well, after all of what was done by these Democrats, whom we criticize so strongly, we have absolutely no other choice but to continue exactly the same policy. What was in Poland, what was in Bulgaria, what was in Hungary, etc., what was in many, many other cases, then what is the problem? No problem whatsoever. If it is only the problem who is sitting in what governmental chair, it is unimportant for the future of democracy. The problem is that the Russian Communist Party, of course, is not of this type. It is not the social democrat, reformed, post-communist, nice post-communist party. It is very much nationalist, very pro-imperial, and nothing shows that they adopted democratic institutions or market institutions or private property as something that should be kept in the Russian realities after their victory. Their most important slogan of the election campaign is the Lenin's word. I do not know exactly how it is in English, but we should steal what was stolen. We should confiscate the property which was accumulated by unjust means. Practically, that means that if they will grab power, they will decide which property was accumulated by the just means, and probably that would be the property of the commercial structures close to the communists, and what was accumulated by unjust means. And then they will have to grab the Mercedes from the unjust firm and to give it to the just communistly connected firm. It, of course, would create a terrible mess of the property relationships, and generally the attempt to implement the policy recommendations, of course, is absolutely incompatible with any stable economic development. Also, it's absolutely unclear whether, after winning one democratic elections, they would ever, in the decades, allow another democratic elections. That's why many of political players, colleagues in the Russian political screen are starting to think whether it is sensible to have an elections in this time. General reasoning is approximately looks like this. Well, any poll shows that the communist base of support is first of all older generation. Any poll shows that, for instance, broadly speaking, Democrats are winning clearly in the age strata before 30 and losing clearly in any age strata after 60. They are Democrats generally winning before 40 and generally losing after 40. Just now, economies start working. Just now, we are having first results of the economic transformation. Late results, but for all the same results. Inflation goes down, export goes up, industrial production in the few important branches of the economy starting rapidly to grow, etc. Why not to postpone the decision? Let us avoid these elections. Let us have them later when the age groups which are the basis of the communist support would not be so active, when the economy will grow, etc., etc. Everything will be splendid. Well, as everybody knows, there is no democracy without capitalism, but you can't have a capitalism without democracy. So if it is impossible to save both democracy and the capitalism, let us save capitalism, and later let us discuss the problems of the democracy. Well, sensible reasoning, but absolutely wrong reasoning from my point of view, because it's absolutely unadjusted to the concrete Russian realities. The problem is, absolutely pragmatically speaking, the problem is that to adopt this strategy, you'll have to have a very clear support of the power structures in your society. The power structures we are clearly pro-capitalist and anti-communist, which are in a position to impose this strategy on the society. The structures on which new elites could rely in absolutely unconstitutional measures, because you cannot do any of these solutions like postponement of the elections, etc., under the present constitutions. This idea is very unpopular in the country. When you are speaking with the people, many of them are dissatisfied with the democracy, elections, are telling, well, we will not come to vote, etc. But the idea of the postponement of the elections is very insulting and unpopular idea. So it's both unconstitutional, very unpopular, and put all of the responsibility, all of the support in the hands of the power ministers. As the previous Prime Minister of Russia, I would not recommend very much to the present government, to the president, to rely very much on this support. So that means that if you are trying to choose this path of the authoritarian transition to keep the capitalism, You're absolutely out of touch with the reality. You're practically creating immediate and very intensive political crisis, the result of which I'm absolutely sure will be the destruction of the present elites and the present institutions. So that means that however difficult it is to defend capitalism and democracy by democratical means, we just do not have any other choice. A lot, of course, will depend on the relationship between the three leading forces in the present Russian politics. These three leading forces being first the coalition of the communists and the nationalists, because they are usually quite easily working together, Democrats, and the present party of power. For the present party of power, quite important part of which was created by the mobilization of the previous party elites, party nomenclatura. Of course, the communist ideology, communist propaganda is very appealing. For somebody who was regional secretary of the Communist Party and now is governor of some Russian province, usually Zyuganov is much closer, the leader of the Russian Communist Party, is much closer than, for instance, Mr. Gaidar. They speak the same language, they together work in the Central Committee, they have tens of years in common, etc., etc. So the head of the party of power is, to some quite important extent, is with the communist. But the bank account is with the capitalist. They are too well incorporated in the market economy. They are too closely connected with it. They do understand that if, for instance, the communists would once again grab power, they would ask very unpleasant questions about the collaboration with the capitalist regime, that they will find a lot of the younger, energetic guys who would like to be in the places of those who are there now. And so that's why, with all of their sympathies to the communism, they are very much hesitant to cooperate with them in the elections and after the elections. We are having a lot of contradictions with the present party of power. We think that a lot of the policies it is promoting is irresponsible. We think that the attempt to create the society with unequal rules of the game, when the possibility of the enrichment is closely connected with your very intensive contacts with the bureaucracy, creates in Russia dangerous and corrupt society. We strongly disagree with the distribution of the financial priorities. We think that the absence of the military reform is a terrible problem for Russia, etc., etc. But, all the same, in one very important issue, we are potential allies. They do not need a revolution, and we do not need a revolution. They would like to preserve stability, and we would like to preserve stability. We have a very different views how this stability should be interpreted. To what goals this stability should lead Russia. But all the same, both of us are disinterested in the revolution and the war. So that, from my point of view, opens the road to the cooperation between the democratical parties and the power parties, nomenclature parties, which are present in the Russian politics, and especially in the created recently our home Russia, Chernomyrdin's party. Of course, the presidential elections would be most important. In Russia, parliament is important, but of course the basis of the power is in the hands of the president. But it is, of course, impossible seriously to discuss the problems connected with the presidential elections before the parliamentary, because at the present stage it is very difficult to say who is practically commanded which part of the Russian population support, which are the possible coalitions, who could be and should be leaders. And we should not, of course, underestimate the parliamentary elections. From my point of view, they will be very, very important in the resolution of the battle for the presidency next year. Just 2 days before we had our party congress, we created the democratical electoral election bloc. Of course, the main strong there is Russian Democratic Choice Party, but also few minor democratical groups. We would try to do everything we could to pursue the population that the attempt to turn backward would be very dangerous to them and to Russia. There are two approaches to the policy in Russia. Part of the politicians regard majority of the Russian populations as people irresponsible, silly, ready to believe in any lie which will be presented to them. Part of them think that the majority of the Russians are sensible people who do understand the argument and common sense. For us, of course, only the second strategy is acceptable. And of course, we'll try everything we can to explain and to pursue the population that they should be politically active. Crucial problem for us, level of political activity. Well, our base of support are young, qualified, educated, and urban. The problem is that they are exactly the strata with the lowest participation rate. The best participation rate is with the strata of the old, rural, low-educated, low-qualified. It is a very well-understood phenomena. I don't think that in this audience I should explain why it is so in Russia. But what is probably our crucial goal is to try to explain to the young, qualified, educated, and urban that if they will be passive this time, if they will let the future of the country to be decided by old, rural, low-educated, and low-qualified, then they will have nobody to blame for the very dangerous consequences for them, for the country, and for the world. I really do agree with you. It will be very crucial elections. The future of Russia, and to quite extensive degree, the future of the world would be resolved on them. Thank you.
We have about 15 or 20 minutes for questions, so try to make them brief, and we'll see if we can fit in as many people as possible. I see Larry Diamond.
Mr. Gaidar, can you tell us more specifically what various Democratic parties are doing to prepare to cooperate in the election so that they don't split their votes, run candidates against each other in different districts, and leave an opening for your opponents to capitalize on that?
Well, our position was always that the cooperation between the democratic parties is absolutely crucial and absolutely essential for the success. That's why we try to create as broad democratic coalition as possible. The key to the success from our point of view was, of course, the coalition between the two big democratic fractions represented in the parliament, because all of the other forces are rather minor in the influence. And that was the Russian Democratical Choice, which had approximately 55 seats in the parliament, and the Yabloko, which has approximately 28, if I don't remember correctly. That's why we tried to negotiate the alliance with Yabloko in May. We are very sorry that it was impossible because of the position of Yabloko, which was expressed very clearly in the program statement of Mr. Yavlinsky in the Izvestia newspaper, which was called, "There is no tragedy in the division of the Democrats." To tell you the truth, I disagree with any word in this article, but, well, it is the present situation. We cannot remake it. But all the same, we will at least try to cooperate in the constituencies. And here we are having a very intensive negotiations to try to support the joint candidates. And to tell you the truth, I think it will be successful, as it looks like now. To tell you the truth, that is exactly the point on which I have to absolutely disagree with the paper of Mr. McFaul. I think that it would be splendid for me to agree to this, because I was made deputy prime minister just after this moment in November. I could tell, well, everything was lost before I was there, so I am responsible, splendid. But to tell you the truth, knowing in-depth situation of the moment, I think that was absolutely out of the practical political possibility. Well, you should understand the realities of the September of the year 91. Failed coup. Yeltsin supported by the majority of the Supreme Soviet of the Russian Federation. Still unexisting practically, but existing legally, Soviet Union. Terrible institutional mess with both Soviet president and the Russian president. Nobody knows to whom the power structures should be loyal, etc. Practically no Russian state, no Soviet state. Necessity to somehow resolve this problem and the need to have the support of the Supreme Soviet of the Russian Federation to resolve it. Well, I am dissatisfied with the present election law. We tried to do everything with previous elections, and we are very much afraid that we will have additional. We were able to pass. It creates the basis for the fight for the final elections, but not everything, of course, is resolved yet. Well, we have very clear position.
Professor Tian, Professor Scanapino, and as you know that Professor Scanapino used to be my professor at UC Berkeley. And I tried to impress my colleagues how hardworking I was. And I brought all those books I read under Professor Scampino, marked down every sentences that he wrote on Japanese modernization. And also I brought a book with me, Professor Dao. And when I studied at UC Berkeley and also Georgetown, my professor, Professor Jim Kirkpatrick, also asked us to read so many books on American politics. Polyarchy, Who Governs, and all those books I still remember and I learn a lot. So it gives me a great honor and a pleasure to come here to host this dinner, and more importantly, to meet with those distinguished professors I used to admire so much as a student, political science. Professor Tian, participants from the third wave democracies, honored guests, ladies and gentlemen. This is my first opportunity to speak with you as a group. So please let me first, on behalf of the people and the government of Taiwan province, welcome you to the Republic of China. I hope that all of you will find an opportunity to get out of Taipei City and see more of our very beautiful island before you return to your home countries. Maybe you should also understand that the province of Taiwan occupies 98% of the territory of the Republic of China, except the city of Taipei. So please come to visit my territory. Our people are known for their hospitality and friendliness, and will welcome you with open arms. If I can be of any service to you, please don't hesitate to contact my office. We are all here this evening to exchange information on our recent democratization and to discuss ways of consolidating this phenomenal development. I personally feel a great deal of exhilaration just contemplating what has actually taken place in my country. The role of the administrator has not become easier. In many ways, it has become more difficult. At the same time, it has certainly made our work all the more interesting and fascinating. Knowing you are working the will of the people gives you an authority and a satisfaction you never had as an appointed administrator. For your background information, that the governor of Taiwan province used to be appointed by the president and the prime minister, but now is popularly elected. Before, we labored in forced isolation, usually in an office sheltered from communities we administered. Now our actions have the full support of our people. In fact, we must be guided by their desires. Technology has also revolutionized our governing styles. As governor of the Taiwan province, I have adopted a style of governing that I call the 3 R's: responsible, responsive, and reasonable. I apply it both ways. My administration must perform in this manner, and the people must approach government in this manner. I'm constantly on the road. In fact, my office is the van. Actually, it's the vehicle that I travel around the island. That is what modern technology has done for us. My van, we have equipped it with fax machines, mobile phones, television, and everything that I can constantly keep in contact with my office and also with the constituents. So I can do a lot of work, and I feel it will give me a more opportunity to meet with more people. Now I have prepared a detailed summary on the development of democracy in the Republic of China. But if I included it all in my talk now, you would be starving by the time I got through with it. So I have therefore decided to provide you with a printed copy of the complete speech. And if you are interested in learning more of the nuts and bolts of our experience, you will have it for later perusal. And we have included that printed material with the small gift that prepared by the government of the Taiwan province. Let me therefore spare you and go directly to the factors that I feel were crucial to the success of our democratization drive. As the first popularly elected governor in the history of China, I feel that I have an obligation not to bore visitors from afar to death by talking too long. You might come back and vote against me next time. And more importantly, I also follow the advice of Richard Skaman and Ben Wartenberg in their very useful book that I read when I was a graduate student at Georgetown and Berkeley. That's the book called The Real Majority. And that book was the cardinal, most important strategy book for me, how to reach to the center. So Mr. Skaman and Wartenberg cautioned that elected officials who talk too much end up offending either the left or the right. So I therefore try to stay in the center. I keep my words to a minimum. Despite the constant threat to our security posed by a communist regime across the Taiwan Straits, the Republic of China has now moved into a democratic camp. Our success is due, I'm convinced, to the rational way in which we approach the objective. So in order to benefit our distinguished guests, I would offer my personal observation and how we credit our victory. And I would credit our victory to 4 specific strategies. First is consensus building. Second is staged reforms. The third one is transparency. The fourth one is stability. In his pioneering and masterfully study of the third wave of democratization, Professor Huntington has correctly identified the Republic of China as a one-party system which democratized through transformation. In analyzing the various political groups in and out of government that affect the democratization process, Professor Huntington made it perfectly clear that reforms is much more difficult than revolution. Incidentally, again, brought the book with me to this evening. I was the book written by Professor Huntington. When I finished that book, that was in 1972. I marked down the date I finished the book and also pull out the first 2 white hair. I stick to that book. And then later I found to read the book of reform, you get 2 hair, white hair. And when you finish the reform process, you got more white hair. So on the extreme conservative side, you have the government stampeders who want to maintain the status quo and the establishment and refuse reform. On the extreme liberal side, you have the opposition radicals who demand change overnight. So in the Republic of China, the Kuomintang, or the ruling party, controlled the government, and if democratization was to be achieved, a consensus had to be built within the party for that reform. So to be successful, it had to have the support of the entrenched leadership, composed mostly of men-enders who had been elected to responsive positions in the late 1940s, and of the Taiwanese or pre-1945 immigrants who comprised the majority of the party membership. To build this consensus, it was necessary to find a coordinator. As Deputy Secretary General before the death of President Jiang Jingguo, and as Secretary General under President Li, I was given this responsibility. My immediate job as coordinating Secretary General of the Kuomintang was to arrange for the retirement of the senior legislators. This was a ticklish assignment. These elderly gentlemen had been elected on the mainland and served the country, government, and party with distinction through a very dangerous period of our history. Times had changed, however, and for the country to move forward, it was necessary that younger legislators, more representative of the local population, assume responsibility. I therefore adopted a moderate approach. Within a period of 3 months, I literally visited the home of every key senior legislator. I tried to convince them that retiring with honor would be preferable to resisting the tide of popular opinion. To voluntarily retire would mean their long service to the party and the government would be honored and protected. Being forced to retire would destroy their well-earned reputation for service. I found the senior legislators in large measure sympathetic with the problems facing the party and willing to make this last sacrifice for the party and the nation. President Chiang had started the process of bringing more Taiwanese into the positions of authority in the party and the government, and President Lee continued and accelerated the movement. It was important at the same time to minimize the distinction between local and mainland-born members of the party. Government opponents had seized upon this issue as a technique to attract members and preach Taiwan independence. Stand-patters opposed to reform within the party were using it to sow discord within the party. It was important that the issue be neutralized. President Lee has been largely successful in this effort. In a recent speech, he pointed out that citizens of the Republic of China are both Taiwanese and Chinese, and called for an end to efforts to create discord among the citizens who all sincerely care about the welfare of the nation. So the second factor is reform by stages. One of the most important decisions of the party was that if democratization was to succeed, the process had to be carried out in stages. Sure but steady, slow but sure. The alternative could well have led to revolution rather than reform. A well-managed, disciplined approach with toleration of the opposition positions was deemed essential. Precipitous overnight changes or stubborn refusal to consider opposition views would have led to a crisis mentality and given those against reform on both the left and right legitimate excuses for attacking and discrediting the process. So in many occasions, sometimes I had to negotiate with the opposition leaders starting from midnight, 12 o'clock, until 6 o'clock in the morning. And it was very, very painful. Sometimes we find it very fruitful. And sincere efforts were therefore made to work with the opposition in order to turn differences into opportunities for cooperation. The KMT has tried from the start to draw opponents of orderly reform into process, and on the whole has been very successful. The party's main concern has therefore been manageable reform, and it has stood firm against calls for actions that would have thrown the movement into a free fall of disorder. So the complexity of the task ahead of us also mandated reform by stages. We were determined that the transition be made within the constitutional framework of the country. Political reform was programmed from the start. President Chiang allowed the formation of new parties. Altogether, now we have more than 70-some political parties, and allowed the and also liberated the press. Before the liberalization, we had only 31 newspapers. Now we have more than 200-some newspapers printed every day. The senior parliamentarians were persuaded to vote themselves out of office. That was not an easy process. They have to vote themselves out of the office to pave the way for the election of a multi-party National Assembly that could amend the Constitution. And also the second legislative yuan, composed of representatives of several parties, was elected. Elections for the provincial governor and the mayors of Kaohsiung and Taipei City were carried out. The process will be completed next March, when the President and Vice President of the Republic are elected directly by the people. And also, I want to insert, to have the constitutional reform complete, the ruling party must win a landslide victory. That is, in order to amend the Constitution, we must have a majority of a 3/4 majority. That was not an easy job. So we campaign. I travel around the island as a manager, a campaign manager for all those candidates. I have to shake hands and also do everything possible. And that was also not an easy job. However, we put all those the process in programmed and staged reform stage. The result of this graded approach, this reform by stages, has meant that we have a population that fully supports the process. The alternative would have been chaos. So the third strategy, and also the third major factor of our success, is transparency. If there has been a revolutionary aspect to our democratization process, it has been in the field of decision-making. Before our transition to democracy began, important government decisions were made in the councils of the party and the information released on a need-to-know basis. That practice is no longer possible. Every important action taken by the government and the party is now subjected to intense scrutiny. The partner in this transformation was the press. With its liberation in the late 1980s, the press very quickly assumed a watchdog role. Much as in the United States, the press has been very critical. At the same time, it has been very supportive of reform. Its dual role has forced the decision-making process to be more responsible and open, and to support democratic reform. It has been both a critique and a partner in the press, in the process. The fourth one I will stress is stability. The final reason for the success of our democratization approach that I would like to mention is the conscious effort we made to maintain stability, to steer clear of precipitous moves that would encourage chaos. By the mid-1980s, Taiwan's economic achievements had led to the emergence of a middle class that constituted 57% of the total population. Middle classes are the bedrock of stability. They will allow political reform only if it preserves stability. At the same time, our emerging middle class voiced dissatisfaction at our essential isolation in the international community. Continued isolation could threaten stability and the security of the economy by affecting trade. So this middle class reasoned that the way to break out of this isolation imposed by the People's Republic of China was to seek democracy and upgrade our international image. They were willing to sacrifice in order to achieve democratic reform. that would protect stability. The support of this group reduced the influence of the more conservative and the liberal elements in the country. Stability that's became a partner of reform. So to conclude my remarks, I want to say there is an ongoing debate on just what democracy means. Some believe that American democracy, for instance, is basically different from what one world leader has called Asian democracies. I agree with Professor Huntington's analysis that democracy has an, quote, institutional core, unquote, whereby, quote, the principal officers of government are chosen through competitive elections in which the bulk of the population can participate, unquote. Aside from that, democracies are by their very nature affected by the values and culture of their people. The essential is that the democracy reflects the wishes of its people. If it fails in that respect, it stands the danger of dying or being cast away. We, therefore, must each seek our own path to democracy. The 30-some democracies represented in this third wave followed 30-some routes to democracy. That is not to say that we cannot learn from each other's experiences, especially now that we are seeking to consolidate our democratic achievements and institutions. And that is the basic reason for this conference. Now that technology has placed the world in constant contact and destroyed a nation's ability to shut out the outside, we should work to find as many areas as possible in which we can cooperate and forward the cause of democracy. We in the Republic of China are extremely confident in the future of our democracy. We have advanced to the state where the process cannot be reversed. We are also confident that we made the right choice, and our people agree. So, ladies and gentlemen, let me once again thank you for joining with us this evening, and thank you for coming all from the far places to share with your experiences with our people here in the Republic of China. Thank you so much.
Gentlemen, the President,
Hi, good day.
Mr. Huntington.
Professor Huntington. How are you?
President.
Professor Huntington, nice to meet you. Welcome my visit.
中欧大学的校长 Dr. Professor Lynch 也有个老朋友
Scalfino, how are you?
Fine, thank you.
Still staying at California?
Yeah, still there.
I see.
Still there.
Very good. Yes.
Professor
How are you?
O'Donnell.
Nice to meet you.
Notre Dame.
Yes.
Professor
How are you?
Dvorsky.
Yes. Nice to meet you.
Stanford大学
Yeah, welcome.
Professor Huntington was indeed in the study of democratic transition and consolidation has expressed particularly which has taken place in the last 20 years, as you all know, because the president is a committed Democrat himself toward democratic development. So all of you about experiences of democracy. And in the course of doing that, we hope that observations in terms of how this
中华民国来召开第三波的民主自治国际研讨会。今天提前有机会和各位见面，没人因为慎重起见，准备了这个是书面，一面有书面讲话，来这个欢迎各位。 弘扬前代中华民国参加全球第三波民主化的发展与巩固国际研讨会，能够在开会之前和大家来见面。首先，仅代表中华民国政府与人民对各位的到来表示诚挚的欢迎，也预祝大家在台北停留的期间事事愉快。自70年代以来，全世界从南欧、中南美到亚洲、非洲，一直到东欧、俄罗斯等国家，民主化的发展勃然方克，沛然磨之能力达到另一波新的高潮。这说明民主政治是世界的潮流，它也没有文化的区别，是人类为了追求生存、发展与尊严，一直向往的理想与信仰。这次研讨会能够回顾这一段历史的过程，比较各国的民主发展经验的异同，进一步丰富民主政治发展的理论，确立更深刻、更精确的原理原则，从而使民主政治更能获得巩固，是相当有意义和价值的。
Since the onset of 1970s,
Ladies and gentlemen, the President.
还有
美国的第二位呢，国家也有他，就是中亚洲不见过的，见过的。见过嘛？去年那个南海的问题，他写了一个备忘录给他们总统嘛。一个人基金会。不基金会的，没有基金会。
Yes, nice to meet you. Yes.
英国来的。
England. I was before now, a year before you were.
Thank you. You're welcome. Hi, how are you? Yes. The Philippines. Welcome.
啊，里面是我们。
哎，你好，对，现在在来。
巴拿马。
Yes. Hi, how are you?
当地最大的报纸了，很好的，负责人，非常积极。巴拿马总统快要来了，这个不要介绍。
对，
他是总统最忠诚的 admirer 工作。
为你要来看，第三点。哎，以前教授，对，厉害。嗨。
希腊政治协会会长，西班牙的，韩国的，
Please, any comments about this conference and also any other questions, please. At least a question.
I think all of us feel this. Your speech yesterday was a terrific beginning. Sam Huntington's speech was a remarkable tour de force in terms of surveying the world. We've had very exciting discussions, especially this morning, about consolidation of democracy in Russia, Latin America, in Asia. And we feel that this conference can really contribute to both deeper understanding to furthering the cause of the March meeting in Taiwan, which is undertaken.
Maybe it's the most high-class conference which has been made here. We have never been such high levels of secara spesial meeting of participation in this category.